So hi, everybody. I want to welcome you tonight. My name is Erin Becker, and I am the Norma Jean Calderwood Director of the Cambridge Art Association. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for our remote celebration of Cambridge Art Association's Winter 2021 online exhibit, Bodies. This exhibit is presented in partnership with Cambridge College, and Bodies was juried by Yng-Ru Chen, who is the founder and CEO of Praise Shadows Art Gallery, which is located in the Coolidge Corner neighborhood of Brookline, Massachusetts. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to remain muted during the speaker portions of this event. We will first view a video of the online exhibit. Then we will hear, first we will hear from our partners at Cambridge College. We'll view an online video of the exhibit. We'll hear from our juror, and then we will hear from 5 of the artists who are participating in the show. We will hopefully have time at the end of the event for networking and socializing in breakout rooms. We do ask that you use the chat, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, to let us know where you're joining from, if you're an exhibiting artist, or if you're here to support one of the artists. You can also direct message folks, your fellow attendees, by clicking on the blue Everyone button in the chat and scrolling to select a particular person, and you can chat with them directly. I'm joined this evening by CAA's Assistant Director, Rebecca Schnapp. If you do have any sort of technical troubleshooting questions, please send those directly to Rebecca, and you'll see her at the top as my co-host. And finally, oops, a little echoing. Finally, if you have questions during the artist talks, please use the hand raise function, which you'll see under reactions. That's the smiley face with a plus sign. When you raise your hand, we'll use that as a signal to unmute you, and you can ask your question of the presenting artist. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're gathered on, both literally and virtually. And this digital land acknowledgement is inspired by the work of producer and artist Adrienne Wong. We gather today in an effort to create art in a new digital format using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. This technology, which has now become central to our daily lives, leaves a significant footprint and contributes to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people. Although we were here together virtually, separated by distance in different geographical locations, collectively, if you're joining us in the United States or in the Americas in general, we sit on Indigenous land, land once occupied and inhabited by hundreds of Native tribes, land stolen from these Indigenous people by European settlers. The genocide and forced removal of Indigenous people from these lands is a history that must be acknowledged, and the current struggles of Indigenous people must be brought to the forefront so that their plight is never forgotten. And with that, thank you again for joining us. I am pleased to introduce Rebecca Heimel, who is the Elizabeth J. McCormick Chair of Humanities and the co-chair of General Education and Multidisciplinary Studies in the School of Undergraduate Studies at Cambridge College. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Erin. I'm so glad to be here. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening and to be speaking on behalf of Cambridge College. I know that many of you who are here may have actually come to live exhibits that we've had in the past with Cambridge Arts Association. And so although we can't be together in our large town common room, it is nice to see your faces and to be here together to celebrate the opening of this exhibit. I am so pleased that we're able to continue our partnership with Cambridge Arts Association, even though we aren't physically together. This is wonderful that we're able to continue. And I just wanted to say a few words about the theme that we're using this year, which was the jumping off point for this exhibit that so many of you worked hard to put work into and that we'll be viewing tonight. So the college puts together each semester a theme, and that theme helps guide our events and activities. And it also ties into what's happening in our classrooms at the undergraduate level so that faculty from across different disciplines find a way to connect what it is that they're working on in their classes to this theme that's chosen. And we chose Bodies, I'm going to say, well over a year ago, long before we knew anything that would be coming in the next year and a half. And bodies has turned out to be the most appropriate theme that we could have picked for fall of 2020. And then we continued it because it was so appropriate and so important, something for us to look at into the spring of 2021. And so it was wonderful that we were able to pick up with Cambridge Arts Association, to work together with Erin and the curator and those who are exhibiting, to really bring some visual parameters around this theme. The pieces that we have been examining as a college, as a School of Undergraduate Studies, have to do around concepts of being embodied people. And in fact, interesting conversation that I had fairly recently was around how embodiment is really what we're missing from one another in our social contact. We can be together virtually, we can see each other's faces, we can in some ways sense each other's presences when we're together in these virtual spaces, but to be embodied people together is something that's missing right now. So I think in some ways seeing this exhibit and viewing it tonight and seeing it together reminds us of that, but also makes us look forward to a time when we can be back together, embodied people in the same space again. So I'm happy to answer any questions about Cambridge College. Just briefly, we're a private 4-year for the undergraduate. We have several graduate schools, nonprofit organization, and we are an open access institution, and so our students come to us without any barriers. We try to break down barriers for students trying to finish their degree. And so the last thing I'll say, if there are any questions, you can certainly put them in the chat for me, but there are many students who come to the college who don't have as much access to arts and humanities. And some of the work that I do is to make sure that that access is there for them as they're completing their studies. And so the partnership with Cambridge Arts allows us to do that. It gives us some pieces to work with within the classroom for students to come to on their own if they so choose, and to connect them into the disciplines and the work that they're doing. So we appreciate that. We thank Cambridge Arts Association very much for allowing that to happen for our students, and just glad to be here. So thanks very much.
Okay, great, thank you. And now we are going to see a tour of the online exhibit. Okay, so I just have to go. Just saw you, Ing. There we go. So now I am pleased to welcome the juror for this exhibit, Yng-Ru Chen from Praise Shadows Art Gallery.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Congratulations, everyone. And it was such a delight to see that video. I saw it earlier today, but seeing it a second time was equally wonderful. So congratulations to all of the artists in this show. I want to first also thank Cambridge Art Association for inviting me to be the juror for this exhibition. Erin and Rebecca, you guys have been wonderful, and I commend you for putting together such an amazing program during this difficult time. And to Cambridge College, Rebecca there as well, thank you for having me. I thought that the theme for this exhibition, Bodies, was also very timely and interesting. Clearly, we all have different relationships right now to our bodies than we may have had just a year ago. And reviewing these submissions for this exhibition was really interesting because I had to kind of rethink about, I had to think about how artists were processing this past year. And, assuming that most of these works were done within that period of time. As you probably know, this was a blind jury, meaning I did not know the names behind the artist or the artworks. So I was judging purely based on the images that were shared with me. So I don't know anything about the life stories, the artist histories, where they were coming from at this point in time. So I really reflected using my own experience and my own perspective and my own worldview going into this. And as somebody who is a gallerist and is, working with artists of all disciplines, I was really excited to see installation art in here, sculpture, and clearly some, wonderful photography and paintings and drawings. But the range of media was really, really spectacular. And I can't wait to see more from what Cambridge Art Association has in the future. I just wish that we could have done this in person. It would have been amazing, especially seeing some of these three-dimensional pieces. That maybe someday we can do a makeover and redo, because I do think when you are experiencing artworks in person, it changes the whole dynamic. It changes your whole experience. I'm fortunate I have a space, my gallery, Praise Shadows Art Gallery, is in Coolidge Corner. We are open to the public, limited capacity, but just the experience of watching people come in and have the connection with the art is truly, truly wonderful. And I can't wait for all of us to be able to have that again. I will say for everybody here, just continue doing, the wonderful work that you are doing. I know that as someone who works with artists, and I see artists as being really the eyes of our society, of our times, and artists are reflecting our times, and I get to kind of edit that for my own space. But that's also what cultural institutions like Cambridge Art Association is doing by selecting the jurors. So, every juror is going to have his or her own take on this. But my own take was that there's a lot of interesting work to be done now that we are kind of at the tail end of this year of COVID, of racial reckoning, of, justice kind of being re-examined in our country. And I feel really strongly that that sort of art is going to continue to have a larger force in the way that curators and galleries see works represented. So I'm very excited because I think a lot of this that I saw here is in that direction, and I'm inspired by it. So thank you all so much. And again, thank you to Erin and Rebecca for inviting me.
Thank you. So we are going to hear from Edward. I'm gonna put you in the spotlight, Edward, and Rebecca is going to show everyone your image. So we just need you to unmute.
Unmuting. And okay, so first, Rebecca's and Erin's and Yng-Ru's and Cambridge Art. Thank you so much for this exhibit. Are you hearing myself?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for this exhibit, for the theme of the bodies, which I think is terrific, and for having me speak. And coincidentally, Yng-Ru, I think I live across the street from your parents. I just found out from a neighbor. And I came by your gallery last weekend, but it was so packed in the middle of COVID that I didn't dare to come in. So I'm happy it was packed, but I'm going to come back another time when when it's not so crowded. So this image called "Survivor with Cherry Garcia" is a photograph of my mom during her last month alive. And it was 2018. She was 87. She'd been having some heart and lung problems, had been in and out of the hospital, and all kinds of therapy. And she finally just decided that she just didn't want to fight anymore. And she just wanted to go home and die. Excuse me. So anyway, fortunately, she was in her home in Atkinson, New Hampshire. We had all read Atul Gawande's Being Mortal, so we knew the importance of aging and dying at home and not going into an institution. I was lucky. I was a professor at Boston University at the time. School had just finished. It was April, May, and I could literally be there every single day. And I told her I was going to photograph her last month, 2, 3, whatever they were, and that I was going to exhibit the work. And she thought it was great because she had been an artist. She had been an illustrator and a musician. She'd studied at Mass Art. So it was this wonderful, wonderful project. It brought us closer together. We talked about so many things about her life and her past and history and her growing up in Mattapan and Dorchester. And I just sat there and took photographs and also made videos. So this was in her bedroom in a hospital bed. And believe it or not, I'm so glad she went before COVID, because there were 10 or 12 people at her house every single day. She was incredibly social, and so social that even her caregivers became her dear friends. So on this particular day, there must have been 8 or 9 of us at the foot of her bed, and we were telling stories and asking questions. And my mom was laughing. She had all her wits about her, despite the fact that she was ill. And all of a sudden, she said, "I'm hot, I'm hot, I'm hot, I'm hot. Take my shirt off, take my shirt off." So one of the caregivers came over, takes her shirt off, and she says, "No, take everything off, take everything off." So the caregiver pulls off everything, and then she says, "I need some ice cream." And so then we get her a bowl of her favorite, Cherry Garcia, and hand her the bowl of ice cream. And she goes right back to having a conversation with everybody. And I'm just sitting there taking photographs thinking, this is crazy. And so there were probably a couple of friends. My brother was there. One or two of the grandkids were there. 2 of the caregivers were there. And we just spent the afternoon, as we did almost every single day, just telling stories. And despite the fact that she couldn't get up by herself and she couldn't, go to the bathroom by herself or take a shower or anything, and that she every now and then needed her oxygen, we had this amazing month together. So yeah, this is just a picture of that, and she loved the picture. She got to see it before she passed, and she knew that the whole project, which I call Slowly at First, would eventually be shown. And at one time we sort of thought she might make it, but she didn't. But anyway, so yeah, it was a great project for me, and really helped me deal with the whole end of life thing. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Edward, for sharing that with us. I think this is a beautiful tribute to your mother and the life that you had with her. So if anyone does have questions, and we are going to do questions at the end of the speaker presentation. So next we're going to move on to Rixie. And I just need to figure out how to find you. Rebecca, can you stop the screen share, please? Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, folks, just bear with me. Zoom hopefully does not alphabetize people in the screens. Are you here, Rixie? Because I saw, okay, I just need to find you. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Now you're in the spotlight.
Oh, cool. Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for having me here. I'm super excited to be part of such a beautiful show. I already felt like just learning about the show when I was submitting and what it could possibly mean to have all these different types of works. It was going to be very interesting to like hear about all these different perspectives. So I was very much like grateful and looking forward to it, especially being able to talk today. I'm very big on my body, and I think body is something that I like to show a lot within my work because it is so sensitive to me. I'm very defensive about my body as a woman. I'm defensive about my body in the climate that we are in, even though this piece was created right in the beginning of the year before a lot was happening. But there was so much that I was already kind of learning about, like the sensitivities around my body, about like my limits with how much I can really do, and that I was able to kind of offer. And within my work, most of the time, I always like to think about it as like some type of cartoon show. So my characters all have their own kind of personality. They're all living a different moment within their own session or kind of idea. So for me, with this character, this was actually like my feral child. Her name is Izzy. So for me, she was kind of like my little scaredy cat of the bunch, where she's probably like the most vicious, but she's the most defensive, kind of like when you know, adopting a new cat that probably might have been going through a lot. I'm also obviously a cat person, even though I love dogs too, but you know. So that's how I felt with this character for myself. And that can have so many different ranges, obviously, as a Latina woman, and what it means to have Black and brown bodies in the climate of everything that was happening. My own body just felt weird. It felt uncomfortable for myself when I was inside my own home, sharing my body around other people and health wise. There was just so much kind of putting myself in that mindset, that I really just started to develop this character that had all of that, even though she's extremely sharp-witted, fast, and little Tasmanian devil. So I was really excited to kind of put this in here and to tell a little bit more about her story, how she's always kind of like prepared and ready to fight, you know, on guard, always with her like sharp claws, but at the same time, there's a lot of like defense and kind of structure, always making me feel like it helps me to, so I don't kind of lose control and I don't get lost in the wind, but also questioning for whose better health that is, and like how much of that am I putting onto myself. So this was a really great time to like add this piece and find a little bit more of that story in her. So thank you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rixie. And again, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of all of the speakers. So next, we will hear from Martha Heller. And Martha, I'm just going to have you unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be included in this program. I'm very grateful. I came to textile work after many years as a clay artist, creating a body of work that included, among other things, clay quilts. These framed tile pieces inspired my historical and contemporary quilt designs and led to my present interest in art quilts and working with fabric. My work now includes art quilts, thread drawing, and most recently, dress sculptures similar to the pieces in the exhibit. I often begin a project with no theme in mind, just a desire to explore new techniques. And as the work develops, a theme emerges. This piece is my first foray into rust dyeing. I've been collecting rusty objects for a long time. When I see one on the street or in a parking lot, I pick it up and save it for my artwork. It has a kind of beauty that calls to mind age and survival. I've used the objects as embellishments for art quilts, but have never dyed with them until now. To start, I spray the fabric with vinegar, wetting it well, then wrap it around the rusty objects of different shapes and sizes. Rolling it tightly and letting it sit for a few weeks under some heavy books, I wait for the brown and orange colors to transfer to the cloth. It's exciting to unwrap it and see what the process brings. For these dresses, I rust dyed a painter's cloth that I rescued when we had our shutters painted. The fabric is woven cotton. It is colored with house paint sprayed on the shutters, leaving shadows of black paint on the cloth that was laid on the lawn underneath. My first project with this painted fabric was a set of three 5-foot long dresses that now hang outside on my garage doors. Youth and I Are Housemates Still is my second project with this fabric. This time, I took leftover lengths of the drop cloth and rust dyed it. The 3 dresses in Youth and I have the same proportions, but each has a different sleeve and neckline design. First, I decide which areas of the dyed fabric should be used to create each part of the dress. Then I cut the cloth freehand and sew it together on a sewing machine. My career designing costumes and my volunteer work with the garment collection at the Blythewell Mansion Museum in Rhode Island have given me a familiarity with dress proportions and construction. To complete the sculpture, I often stiffen the dress with gel medium or draping stiffener. Some need a wooden support underneath. These dresses have both. People often ask me why I use the dress as a sculptural form. First, it's a form that I know intimately. I understand how to change or exaggerate certain features to express a theme. Second, the dress as an object is connected to the history of women in society, much like quilt making. I use repurposed materials for a similar reason. Quilts are often made from leftover fabric that has a history separate from the finished work. But the fabric deepens the story the quilts tell. The same is true of my pieces. I've constructed dress sculptures out of many repurposed materials: netted orange produce bags, plastic mail bags, airport souvenir bags, and vintage tablecloths. I've also made dress sculptures out of vintage linens colored with pounded flowers and indigo leaves from my garden. For me, Youth and I Are Housemates Still tells a personal and universal story. The title is a quote from a Coleridge poem called Youth and Age. The 3 dresses, one with no rust color, one with a little, and one with a good portion dyed, work together to create a narrative. Each dress is more aged than the next. There's a sequence. The dresses echo what has been on my mind lately, aging into my 70s and still maintaining a youthful attitude toward exploring new techniques and making new art. Thanks.
That's wonderful, Martha. Thank you so much for sharing that and for talking about your technique in creating these. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Hopkins.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Erin and Rebecca and Cambridge Art Association, and also to Yng-Ru Chen and Cambridge College for putting this exhibit together. It's really fantastic, and thank you also for the opportunity to talk to you all about my work. So this photograph is part of a project that I embarked on this past fall. It was kind of a departure for me because normally, I guess I would characterize my work as kind of more like street photography, landscape photography, or abstract, but very much in this process of reacting spontaneously to subject matter around me. And so this particular project was different because I kind of came to it with an idea and kind of wanted to create certain uh, visuals in order to explore that idea. Um, and it was kind of this idea of trying to really explore this process of becoming refamiliarized with myself. Um, and I think that goes back to the beginning of the pandemic in part. Because I think a lot of people can identify with this. Many of us went from living very busy lives where we were commuting every day. I personally, I have a 9 to 5 job, so I was commuting every day, and living in Boston, I was constantly inundated with sights and sounds. And to go from that to this very quiet, still environment where I was living in my apartment every day, created an opportunity, I guess, in a sense, for me to kind of sort of transfer my energy from focusing on the external world to kind of exploring my own internal space. Um, and also during the pandemic, I came out of a long-term partnership, and that was a pretty major life shift for me. And it raised a lot of questions about who I am and what my direction is, and what it looks like for me to make decisions only for myself after a long time of considering, considering someone else in kind of my life direction. I spent a lot of the fall kind of going through this process of self-reflection and reclaiming my space. In my apartment, I kind of redesigned everything and was kind of thinking a lot about the sort of extension of identity into the sort of physical realm. And I decided that I really wanted to kind of explore a lot of these thoughts that I was having visually. And that's, kind of where the idea for this series came from. Um, and so this series really explores like themes of like vulnerability, self-exploration, self-doubt, and growth. Um, and I think through this process, I was really kind of seeking self-empowerment while also trying to examine those parts of myself that I didn't necessarily like or understand. Um, so that kind of process of self-confrontation is what gave me the idea for this particular image, and kind of the pain that sometimes comes with that. Um, and there were another couple of pieces in this series, one in particular that was like a fragmented self-portrait that I created with mirrors. And I was really drawn to this idea because I was thinking a lot about sort of internal versus external perceptions and expectations of ourselves, and how like trying to navigate that can sometimes feel like trying to work through a hall of mirrors. Um, so yeah, this project was very important to me. It was kind of a departure in many ways. And one way was that I had never actually turned the camera on myself. I've always mostly been photographing other things. And this was the first time I had ever shot anything nude. It was very like low key, but it still felt very like vulnerable and like intimate and kind of nerve wracking to do that. But also I think because of that, it also was like very rewarding. Um, and I think this particular show theme, bodies and kind of this idea of becoming intimate with yourself and knowing yourself. To me, it's a very intimate process, and so that's why it was important to me to do that, and to explore this particular theme in a very sort of visceral way. Um, so yeah, that's about it. And thanks again so much, for this opportunity and for a great exhibit.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that. This is striking, and having seen a lot of your other work, it's all of your other work is like landscapes and buildings. It's wonderful to see a different side. So our fifth and final speaker for the evening is Cindy Liu. Cindy, I'm going to spotlight you and just ask you to unmute.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Erin and Rebecca, Yng-Ru, and everyone else who's here. I'm still kind of just.
Cindy, we can't really hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Let's turn the volume up a little bit, maybe on your device.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Great. So thank you, Erin and Rebecca, Yng-Ru, and everyone else who's here. I'm still kind of just absorbing all this artwork. It's just so beautiful. Thank you to the other artists as well, and to everyone who was not presenting. So again, my name is Cindy Liu. And just to give you a little bit of background, I used to be a scientist for many years. So in my art practice, I really tend to like to experiment with materials and techniques. And in general, I'm interested in spaces or moments of tension or transition. And so my work tends to just like dwell within intermediate states or at inflection points where different trajectories might be possible. And the piece shown here, I'm calling Retraining Module B. And it addresses things like loss versus acquisition of bodily knowledge, artificiality versus lived experience, and the familiar versus the strange. It's actually part of a larger project I'm working on about surveillance and the body as a locus of both vulnerability and resistance. So even though I started this project pre-COVID, I think there are all these other layers that, to be honest, I haven't really processed that kind of get layered on top of it now that we're in the COVID era. But this is my first time really talking about this piece, and the project itself is still in early to mid stages. So kind of bear with me as I'm figuring out how to put things into words. So the piece itself, I think, looks vaguely like a sheet of epithelial cells. So, this is the biologist in me, because I seem to have a thing for imagining inanimate objects or things sort of self-organizing into forms that are vaguely quasi-biological. And so it's made out of repeating silicone units that I molded from infant pacifiers. And then I aggregated them into this larger form. And that might kind of seem grotesque, but maybe also draws you in. And it isn't really until you're close up that you can make out the pacifier form. And in making this piece, I was thinking about how we all start off as babies, nursing, for nourishment, but also putting things in our mouth to try and get an understanding of the world around us, also for self-soothing. And the pacifier itself is already like an artificial copy of the biological. And then now here we have copies of copies replicating into something that's kind of like something biological. And part of what I wanted to do with this piece is to defamiliarize and also refamiliarize this early and very embodied kind of knowledge, this, somatogustatory modality, because out of all our senses, touch and taste are sort of the most localized modes of interacting with our surroundings. Everything else involves some distance. And from these early stages, we all develop fundamental frameworks and patterns for perceiving and engaging with the world based on our history of interactions as physical embodied beings. And ideologies and beliefs then coalesce from it and reinforce these patterns. So as a retraining module, quote unquote, this piece is meant to kind of raise questions of what kind of functions we're dealing with. Can this module help us to reteach ourselves what embodied knowledge is? So to return to this earlier sensory mode so that we can move towards a kind of conscious integration of what we've lost thanks to the Enlightenment that has given us a lot of dualisms that fracture. Could it help us to open up the possibility of new patterns? This is a space of both a lot of hope, but also a lot of peril. Maybe the module, though, functions as a decoy, something that's growing, but that's false, something that is designed to attract and could harness impulses that we might not even be aware of and hold us captive. Maybe something that can draw people pleasantly and comfortably into circumstances of mass surveillance, injustice, or autocracy. So these are just a few of the things that were swirling around my mind when I was making this piece. I'd be curious to hear what you all sense from it. Just as a side, in terms of the first possible function I mentioned, I was really kind of intrigued to find that when I actually tried putting one of these in my mouth, it was definitely kind of weird, but I was also surprised at how it just instantaneously triggered some like sense of distant familiarity, almost like a memory of a memory. Actually, this is how memory works anyway, making copies of copies. And so again, with COVID, there's a lot that gets layered on top of it. I'd be curious to hear how people react to it in our present time. But I think I'll just end there.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy. Rebecca, I'm gonna have you end the screen share for right now. And if anyone has any questions for any of our speakers or for any of the artists in the exhibit, since you did get a chance to see all of the work, let us know by raising your hand in the reactions section at the bottom of your screen. This little smiley face, the plus sign. I want to thank Edward, Rixie, Martha, Elizabeth, and Cindy for all speaking tonight and sharing your moving stories and diverse perspectives of the theme bodies. I'm gonna move myself back into the spotlight right now. Does anyone have any questions for anybody? So if you don't have any questions, we are going to open up breakout rooms because we did ask you if you were coming to visit an artist. We have assigned those artists that seem to have relatively large fan bases with their own breakout rooms. And then also the speakers, we have breakout rooms. So if you want to ask them questions one-on-one, you can do that. The way that the breakout rooms are set up, when I open them, you will be able to pick which room you go into. So you'll be able to see the names of each room and you can select where you want to go. If you don't want to go into a breakout room, that's totally fine. We appreciate that you joined us this evening. This was recorded, so the speaker portions will be put on our YouTube station soon. If you don't follow us, you can visit cambridgeart.org and click our social media dropdown to follow us on all of our social media channels. Before I do open the breakout rooms, I want to thank again our juror, Yng-Ru Chen. Definitely go visit her in her brand new gallery in Coolidge Corner. Their current show is closing this weekend, and their next exhibit is with Duke Riley. I also want to thank our Cambridge College partners, including Rebecca Heimel and Philip Page. We've worked with Cambridge College, I think, since 2013. I've been in this position for 8 years, and like time has turned into a flat circle, I think, for all of us this year. But particularly, it's hard for me to remember sometimes which year things started. But we've been working with Cambridge College since they were on Mass Ave, and now in their beautiful spaces in Charlestown. We do hope you enjoy the artwork online. It will be up until March 19th. And with that, I want to also thank Rebecca Schnapp, our assistant director, for all of her support in getting this show on the website and making it happen for this organization. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms. If you want to join one, you can pick which one you go to. And if you are having trouble, you can let us know and we can direct you accordingly.